The soft beeping of the monitor filled the small recovery room. Outside, snow still drifted against the clinic windows, a reminder of the storm that nearly stole everything away. Daniel sat motionless, his hand resting gently on Shadow's paw. His partner's fur was warm again, longer, icy to the touch, and that single detail was enough to keep Daniel rooted there for hours. Exhaustion gnawed at his body, but his heart refused to let him leave. Every rise and fall of Shadow's chest was a victory, every small twitch of his ear a miracle. Nurses came and went, adjusting machines, checking fluids, but Daniel barely registered them. His focus was on one thing only: the bond tethering him to the dog who had fought his way back from the edge of death. At dawn, light spilled across the room, soft and golden. Shadow stirred, his eyes opening fully for the first time. They locked onto Daniel's, and in those amber depths, Daniel saw recognition. Not confusion, not pain, just the quiet acknowledgement of a friend who had made it through the storm. Daniel leaned forward, whispering, "Good morning, partner. You had me scared half to death." Shadow gave the faintest wag of his tail, weak but determined. That simple gesture was enough to draw tears back to Daniel's eyes. Recovery was slow, and patience was tested. Shadow couldn't walk without trembling at first. Powerful muscles had weakened from the ordeal. But each day brought small victories. A steady drink of water, a tentative step, a stronger wag of the tail. Daniel was there for every single milestone. He fed Shadow by hand when his appetite was fragile, brushed the ice, damaged fur with gentle strokes, and even slept on the floor beside his kennel at night, unwilling to leave him alone. Colleagues stopped by the clinic. Some clapped Daniel on the back and said they had known Shadow would make it. Others shook their heads, they thought the dog wouldn't survive. To each of them, Daniel only said one thing: he's stronger than anyone realizes. And it was true. Shadow's spirit hadn't broken, even when his body nearly did. That resilience reflected something Daniel had learned from his partner years ago: the will to push forward when the world wanted you to stop. Weeks later, Shadow finally returned home. The police department held an unofficial celebration. Officers gathered in the precinct lot, watching as Daniel opened the cruiser door. Shadow leapt out, not with the same force he once had, but with enough strength to show everyone that he was back. Cheers erupted. Officers who had served beside them whistled, applauded, and even bent down to ruffle Shadow's fur. One rookie officer whispered, "I've never seen anything like this bond." The chief, a stern man rarely moved by emotion, said quietly, "This dog isn't just part of the force. He's a reminder of why we fight through every storm." Daniel smiled, his chest swelling with pride. Shadow stood tall beside him, his ears perked, his amber eyes sharp once again. But survival wasn't the end of their story. It was a beginning. Daniel noticed something different about Shadow after the ordeal. Calmer, more watchful, almost as if he had glimpsed something beyond the veil of ordinary life. On patrol, he stuck even closer to Daniel's side. At home, he followed him from room to room, refusing to let him out of sight. One night, as Daniel sat on the porch watching the stars, Shadow placed his head on his handler's knee. For a long time, Daniel stroked his fur, thinking about what they had survived. And he realized something powerful. Life had given him back a gift he thought was gone. It wasn't just luck. It was a reminder of what mattered most. The connections we can't replace, that never wavers, the kind of love that refuses to die, even under a blanket of snow. Months passed and Shadow returned to duty. Slowly at first, with renewed strength. His nose caught scents others missed. His bark echoed with command. His presence on the street once again turned tense moments into surrender. Criminals might resist an officer, few dared resist a German shepherd with eyes that seemed to see straight into their soul. For Daniel, working with Shadow again felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater too long. Every call reminded him of how close he came to losing his partner, and every successful mission reminded him of why they had fought so hard to survive. But there was one mission that would etch itself into memory: that Shadow's survival wasn't just a miracle, it was destiny. It happened during a frigid evening in late January. The department received a call: a child had gone missing in the forest near town. Panic rippled through the community. The boy was only 7, and the temperature was dropping fast. Daniel and Shadow were dispatched immediately. As they arrived, the boy's mother clutched Daniel's arm, her eyes wide with desperation. "Please find him." Daniel knelt to meet her gaze. "We will, I promise." He looked at Shadow, who seemed to understand without words. His ears perked, his nose lowered to the ground, and within seconds, he caught the scent. The search began. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they followed the trail through twisting trees. The cold gnawed at Daniel's face, but he ignored it, only on Shadow's determined pace. The dog pulled forward, sniffing with precision, weaving through drifts and brush until suddenly, he stopped. A muffled sound drifted through the trees, a faint cry. Daniel's heart raced. They sprinted toward it, and there, nestled beneath a fallen tree and half buried in snow, was the missing boy. His lips were blue, his breath shallow, but he was alive. Daniel dropped to his knees, the child into his arms, wrapping him in his coat. The boy's small fingers clung to Daniel's shirt, but his eyes focused not on the officer, on Shadow. He whispered weakly. Shadow leaned forward, pressing his warm nose against the child's cheek, and the boy managed a tiny smile. When the boy was returned safely to his mother, the community erupted with gratitude. The mother fell to her knees, hugging both Daniel and Shadow, tears spilling onto the snow. "You saved my son," she cried. Daniel glanced at his partner, who stood tall beside him. "No," he said softly. "He did." That night, as Daniel drove home with Shadow in the back seat, he realized the truth. The storm that nearly took Shadow's life wasn't just a tragedy, preparation. Because surviving it gave them the strength and unity they needed to save another life. Fate had written their bond in snow and blood and loyalty. Not even death's icy grip could erase it. The story of Officer Daniel and Shadow spread far beyond their small town. Newspapers ran headlines, "9 found buried alive, returns to save child." Social media lit up with photos of the dog standing proudly in his vest, amber eyes glowing beneath the badge. People shared their story across countries, calling it a testament to courage, loyalty, and love. Children sent letters to the police station, pictures of Shadow as a superhero. Families dropped off treats and toys. The department even received donations for new K9 units by the dog who refused to give up. But for Daniel, the fame didn't matter. The applause didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet sound of Shadow's breathing at night, the thump of his tail against the floor, the steady presence at his side through every storm. Often thought back to that snowy night when he clawed through ice and frost, praying he wasn't too late. He had saved Shadow then, but in many ways, had saved him every day since. And so, their story became more than survival. It became a lesson about never giving up when everything seems lost, a lesson about the bonds we can't replace, the ones worth fighting for with every ounce of strength we have. A lesson that sometimes, the world buries us under weight too heavy to bear. Loyalty and love are the hands that dig us out. For Daniel, the journey with Shadow was proof that hope survives even in the coldest storms. For Shadow, it was proof that trust is never misplaced when given to the right heart. Together, they reminded everyone who heard their story of one truth: love, whether between man and dog, parent and child, and friend, is the force that can melt even the coldest snow. As the years passed, Daniel often looked at Shadow with awe. His muzzle turned gray, his pace slowed, but his spirit never dimmed. And when the day finally came when Shadow laid down his head for the last time, Daniel whispered the same words he had said that night in the snow. "I've got you, boy. I'm here. You're not leaving me. Not ever." Because some bonds don't end. They simply carry on, etched forever in the heart. And that is what happened after Officer Daniel found his missing K9 buried alive in the snow. A story not just of survival, but of loyalty, courage, and the kind of love that melts even though the wind howled through the silent forest, carrying with it a bitter chill that cut into the bones. Snowflakes fell like shards of glass from the gray sky, thickening the white blanket that already swallowed the land. Officer Daniel Price adjusted his coat, pulling the collar tighter around his neck as his boots crunched against the frozen ground. He wasn't out here for routine patrol. He wasn't out here for paperwork or duty. He was out here because something dear to him had vanished. Something more than a partner, more than a companion. His K9, Shadow, had gone missing. Shadow wasn't just a German shepherd trained to track suspects, sniff out narcotics and protect his handler. He was family. For 6 years, Shadow had ridden in the back of Daniel's cruiser, his dark amber eyes glinting with focus during every call. Together, they had caught thieves, children, and even chased a suspect across the interstate. Shadow had once thrown himself between Daniel and a knife, wielding criminal, in a cut to his side that nearly ended his life. But he had survived. And since then, Daniel had promised that no matter what, protect his dog just as fiercely. But now Shadow was gone. 3 days earlier, during a rescue mission in the outskirts of a snowbound mountain town, a storm had swept through with terrifying speed. Daniel had taken his squad into the blizzard, searching for stranded hikers. Shadow was tethered to his handler, as always, but the chaos of the storm was unforgiving. A tree had cracked under the weight of ice and fallen, separating Daniel from his dog. The rope snapped, swallowed instantly in a wall of white. By the time Daniel dug his way through the snowdrift, Shadow was gone. The search had stretched into nights filled with guilt. Other officers tried to reassure him. He's trained, he's tough, he'll find shelter. But Daniel knew the cruel truth. Mountains didn't forgive weakness. Even the strongest animals froze without shelter. The thought of Shadow out there, alone in the endless cold, at his chest like a predator clawing from within. Today marked the 4th day of searching. His body screamed for rest, but his heart refused, going back empty-handed. Daniel trudged deeper into the trees, his breath clouding before him. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the occasional groan of branches heavy with snow. His flashlight beam sliced across the whiteness, scanning for paw prints, for broken branches, any trace of movement. Every shadow tricked his eyes, every noise twisted his hope. And yet, he pressed on. Somewhere in the distance, muffled by the snow, a sound echoed. A cry, weak, short, barely there. Daniel froze. His breath caught, his ears sharpened, entire body snapping to attention. He tilted his head, listening again. There it was. A whimper. His heart hammered against his ribs. Shadow, he called, cracking against the trees. No answer. Only silence. He sprinted forward, stumbling over roots hidden beneath the snow, his flashlight bouncing wildly in the dark. The sound grew clearer, desperate, like a life clinging to its last strength. Then, as he reached a small clearing, fell upon something chilling. A patch of disturbed snow. Uneven, sunken in places as though the ground had swallowed something alive. Daniel dropped to his knees. No, no, no. His gloved hands clawed at the snow, shoving it aside in frantic waves. His breath burned in his lungs as he dug, and deeper until finally, a paw, a trembling paw half buried in ice. Shadow? He scraped faster, his fingers numb, his heart screaming louder than his thoughts. Bit by bit, the shape of his dog emerged from beneath the suffocating snow, his fur matted with frost, his eyes shut tight. Shadow was alive but barely. His chest rose in shallow, painful gasps, his body shivered violently, and his once proud ears were pinned flat. Daniel yanked off his coat and wrapped it around the trembling dog, pulling him close. I've got you, boy. I'm here. You're not leaving me. Not like this. His voice cracked, his tears instantly freezing on his cheeks. The bond between a handler and his K9 is unlike any other. It's built on trust forged in danger, long nights of training, in moments where both lives balance on the edge of a knife. Shadow had trusted him countless times. Now it was Daniel's turn to prove worthy. But getting him out of here alive wouldn't be easy. Carrying a 100-pound dog through snow that swallowed his legs up to the knee was near impossible. Yet Daniel refused to quit, hoisted Shadow onto his shoulders, the dog's weak body draped across him, and staggered forward. His legs screamed with every step, came in ragged bursts, and the freezing wind lashed against his face. Still, he pressed on. Every few minutes, Shadow let out a faint whine, begging not to be left behind. Daniel whispered back, "I'm not leaving you, not today. Not ever." He thought about the first time he met Shadow. Just a pup then, all oversized paws and restless energy. Other handlers had overlooked him. He was too stubborn, too wild. But Daniel had seen the fire in his eyes. He had seen the potential. They had grown together, trained together, stumbled through mistakes and celebrated victories side by side. Shadow wasn't just his partner. He was his anchor in a world that often drowned men in chaos. The memory fueled his steps. By the time he reached the road where his cruiser waited, Daniel's vision blurred. His legs threatened to collapse. He forced them to keep moving. With trembling hands he opened the car door and laid Shadow inside. Cranking the heater to full blast, rubbed his partner's paws trying to restore warmth. Shadow's eyes fluttered open just enough to meet his, amber eyes. Weak, but still there. Still alive. "Stay with me, boy. We're not done yet." The veterinary clinic lights flickered like a beacon of hope when Daniel pulled into the lot, burst through the doors with Shadow in his arms shouting for help. Nurses rushed forward, guiding him into the